There's a hell of a lot to think about in Valorant. You have to shoot your gun, throw your util, worry about the other team shooting their guns and throwing their util, and then there's the money. It's often overlooked, but one of, if not the most vital element to success in Valorant is how you manage your economy, so today we're going to learn how to do just that. We'll start with the basics of how credits work in Valorant, then move on to some of the big ways you can take advantage of your opponent's economic situation as well. Before we know how to use it, we should probably first know how Valorant's economy actually works. We're all familiar with the basics of how much the guns, shields, and utility cost, and we all know you want roughly 4,500 credits for a full shield rifle buy with all util, depending on the agent. After every round, both teams are awarded creds based on the round's outcome. Each kill awards the killing player 200 creds, and planting the spike awards each team member 300. The winning team will always gain 3,000 creds each after a round, but for the losing team, it depends on how many rounds in a row they've lost. For the first loss in a row, everyone gets 1,900 creds. For the second, 2,400, and for the third onwards, 2,900, almost as much as the winning team. Your team's spike objective also determines credit distribution. As the attack, any surviving player in a lost round in which you failed to plant the spike will always gain 1,000 creds. Anyone who died will gain their normal loss streak bonus. On defense, if the attacker's plant and the spike detonates, any surviving player will also only gain 1,000 creds instead of the usual loss bonus. As a general rule of thumb, you need these totals of creds to be able to buy next round depending on your loss streak bonus. Generally speaking, any round with stronger guns than your opponent is going to be a win. Simple enough. Because of this, most economic decision making comes down to stabilizing your own team's economy while trying to reset your opponent into eco rounds. Generally, the first 4 rounds of a half tend to look something like this. We start with the pistol, then the anti-eco, which we expect the pistol winners to win, the bonus, which we expect the pistol losers to win, and then the equal buy round, which can broadly go either way. Since they have a general flow and are the most consistent in a given half, we're going to start with these rounds, how we maximize our chances of success in them, and what happens when unexpected results happen. We'll start now at the start of our half, with the pistol round. The pistol is the most economically important round in any given half. It's for this reason that Sliggy can't stop counting them, and that everyone's so impressed at feats like Genji's 11 pistol win streak at Masters Toronto. The pistol is important because winning it gives you a theoretically free anti-eco win and allows you to begin building a strong economy before the other team. Economizing the pistol round itself is nice and easy. Spend all your money. You only have 800 creds and it's the most important round in the half. The way guns and util are balanced in a pistol round depends a lot on the comp, map, and general strategy, so that we'll leave alone. After the pistol, we get the eco or anti-eco, and this is where we have to start making some actual economic decisions. The way you'll want to buy in this round depends a lot on style, which side you're on, and obviously whether you won or lost the pistol. We'll assume to start with that we've won the pistol round. In the anti-eco, the whole team will typically have anywhere from 3,000 to around 3,800 creds, depending on spike plant and factors like how kills were distributed in the pistol. This range is enough to buy rifles. Obviously, buying a rifle or hard forcing with a smaller gun increases the odds that a player will win any given gunfight and be able to multi-frag, which is good, but it comes with the added risk that if the gun is lost, you won't be able to carry it into the bonus. You also risk handing over your gun and giving your opponent away into the round. Since this round is ours to win, our goal is guaranteeing the win and giving ourselves a strong chance at converting the bonus too. The more guns we lose in the anti-eco, the less likely we are to make that happen. We can see this by comparing two teams who both won the pistol and anti-eco, but took very different amounts of economic damage in the process. In this match, BBL brought down on all 5 players, but took 4 guns worth of economic damage, so their bonus was shaky and massively disadvantaged. Compare this to this match where Genji won a flawless anti-eco against DRX with only 2 players hard forcing, putting them on a really strong buy in the bonus, which enabled them to convert. Cheaper weapons can become part of this balance as well, in particular the Stinger and Marshall. Because of their low costs, these guns have some interesting economic properties. First, it's possible to guarantee a steady flow of creds by buying one of these guns in the anti-eco but with, say, light shields. Assuming you have around 1,500 creds to spare and win the anti-eco, you'll come out with at least 4,500 creds next round. This is enough that even if you died, rebuying a stinger, some light armor, and your util back will still leave you at about 2,000 or more creds, which is enough to buy a rifle if you lose the bonus. In our Genji example from earlier, Munchkin had a whole 3,800 creds going into the anti-eco, and spent 1,550 on a martial and light shields, leaving him on 2,250 creds. After the win, this meant he actually had full rifle money for the bonus despite having light bought in the anti-eco. These guns are also interesting because even after a force, you can resort to them in a bonus if you're willing to risk some light shields in the equal buy round. Let's say you buy down to 500 creds in the anti-eco and die having gotten no kills and not planted the spike, leaving you with 3,500 creds to your name. 3,500 minus 1,100 for the stinger, minus another 400 for shields, and say 400 for some util leaves you on 1,600 creds. 1,600 plus 1,900 for the loss leaves you at 3,500 creds. This is enough for either a big rifle plus light shields or say a guardian and lights to give you some breathing room for utility. I can't wholly say I recommend this approach, but some teams sometimes resort to it on 1 or 2 players to give them a solid chance at bonus conversion while also holding money for round 4. While we're on the topic, I will also say the Marshal is incredibly powerful in the current economic meta. We're gonna have to do a little bit more math to explain this, so sorry in advance. After a pistol loss, depending on the factors we discussed before, most players are usually looking at anywhere from 1,900 to 2,400 creds. Anyone on the lower end of that range, getting an assumed 2,400 creds after the eco loss, will be sitting somewhere between 4,200 and 4,800 creds, which is enough to comfortably afford a rifle. The threat of the outlaw incentivizes these players to hold all or most of their creds to maximize their chances at a heavy shield rifle buy in the bonus, since no one wants to be outlaw one-shot in a force buy round. This is because, assuming you're on the lower end of our 1,900 to 2,400 cred range and spend even 400 creds, you're likely to have to skimp out on something, shields, gun, or util, in your bonus buy. Ordinarily, this would be fine, but with the outlaw in the game, skimping on shields is less viable and skimping on util and guns kinda just sucks, making the Marshal free one-shots in the anti-eco. This is why we get clips like this.
Get overwhelmed. Shots amount should gonna be going wide. Quick scope in, however, hip fire. Guns down 3, gets the 4th.
Saving and holding onto a ghost or sheriff from the pistol will guarantee a rifle for the bonus because even factoring util and light shield costs, you'll be sitting at around 5,400 plus creds. This allows you at least a safe guardian or bulldog buy with enough left over for a rifle in round 4, even after a round loss. Let's also take a final quick look at the operator. If you're aiming for an op round 3 after winning the pistol, you'll need someone holding between 1,700 and 2,500 creds to be able to buy it after the win. Additionally, if you want to guarantee an op round 3, regardless of whether you win or lose the pistol, just save in the pistol and in the eco if you lose it. Personally, I wouldn't recommend either of these approaches because I think taking such a big bite out of your round 4 buy or out of your all-important pistol buy are weak strategies. Now that we understand the maths of the anti-eco, we can look at how we distribute our weapons to actually play it. This is where things can depend a little on which side you're on. When we're attacking, we typically move in more of a uniform group, with maybe a lurker to threaten other areas of the map or gain information. Because of this, any gun dropped will usually have a player nearby to pick it up. This has 2 ramifications. First, any gun dropped is less likely to go to the enemy, assuming you've strategized well around where fights are happening. Second, players with weaker guns are more likely to trade or be traded by stronger ones if you're in a trade fight, as opposed to defense where skirmishes can be a little more isolated. Because of this, it's safe to be a little more conservative with creds on attack. Some teams quite like the FPX buy, which is buying 3 rifles and having 2 players save. One of the saving players is a lurker, the other is there to pick up a potential lost gun. As a general rule, we can say at this point that the number of players who saved are the number of deaths the team is allowed before you take economic damage concerning weapons. An all-important rule in the attacking anti-eco is that any player who's isolated or lurking must be a player who's saving. This is because, should they die, their gun is handed over to the defense and could give them an edge in the round. There are lots of different approaches to economizing this aside though. 5 players forcing is good for guaranteeing the much needed round even if it all but sacrifices your bonus if 2 or more players die. Playing 3 rifles and a half buy, 2 forces and 2 half buys, or even 5 half-bought stingers are all solid as long as we aim to keep as many alive as possible for a strong bonus. On defense, the same rules of economy apply, but the way the map is played is different. Generally, defending teams are much more spread out than attacking teams past a certain point in the round. This means gunfights will happen with less players around to retrieve dropped guns, and that each individual player needs slightly more of an edge in the more isolated gunfights they're liable to take. For this reason, I would generally argue that you should always have 4 players buy at least something, and maybe 1 player save to give the economic cushion of 1 death. Like we said before, the Marshal is especially strong right now, and this is especially so on defense. This can give you a bit of a loophole in the 4 buying rule of thumb, because you can take approaches like having 3 players force, 1 player buy a Marshal or a Stinger with around 1300 to 1500 creds left over, and 1 save, which technically gives you closer to a 2-death economic cushion. Unfortunately, not all pistols are ours to win. As the team who lost the pistol, what can we do to maximize our chances at success? As for the maths, we've already discussed it briefly, but just to reiterate, you're really poor. Unless you're confident in your chances of winning the eco, you have more or less no room to buy. That said, there are some decisions we can make to increase our chances at doing some economic damage. While generally most players having classics is the move, forcing a sheriff on 1 player can be a solid way to give increased chances at one-shots and also enable you to force shield rebuys on players that take a body shot. More extremely, some teams might go for a Marshal for the same reason, forcing armor rebuys and giving a good chance at some kills if the forcing player lands a nice shot. Of course, the repercussion of this is you're down 1 perfect buy in the anti-bonus next round, as we can see here. This approach is much more economically viable if you're on attack and manage to plant the spike in the pistol, and especially so if you have a player that killed multiple enemies in the pistol as well. It's also generally stronger on attack because if the buying player dies, their gun is easy to retrieve and keep using until round end. In our example between BBL and Vitality earlier, Vitality actually chose to full force an outlaw for Durka using Kovacs' creds, which is part of how they managed to do so much economic damage. Naturally, this took a bite out of their anti-bonus purchase, but because BBL were practically limping into that round anyway, it was an easy enough win. The Outlaw can be particularly strong for this if you have the creds, because you'll have a one-shot on any player who buys a full rifle, since in this round they'll only ever have light shields. In that particular round, Durka forced full shields with the Outlaw, so he was actually on even footing with anyone using a sniper and heavies, and would have beaten anyone using an Outlaw and light shields. Speaking of planting as the attack, there's another option that opens up pretty nicely if you plant and lose to the retake: the full Stinger Force. A spike plant is worth 300 per player, which turns at least 1900 creds in the next round to 2200 plus per player, which is enough to buy a Stinger, light shields, and some util. Obviously, losing this round sets you pretty behind economically since you have to eco in round 3, but it also gives you pretty solid odds at the eco win or causing some economic setbacks for the defense. This can also be map dependent. Forcing here is especially popular on Icebox Attack due to the A site's geography suiting Stinger 5-mans, as we can see DRX doing. Part of the charm of this strategy is that even if you lose this round, because of lost streak bonuses you'll still be economically revived by round 4 for the equal buy. This is because your lost streak bonus for losing round 3 is 2900 creds, which means each player only needs to be sitting on about 1300 or 1600 to guard against outlaw one-shots once round 3 starts up, which is easily doable after the 2400 gain from losing round 2. Now, if you lose to a Stinger Force as the team who won the pistol, your life kinda just sucks. Any player who fully forced down to a couple hundred creds will only have in the 2000s range going into round 3, and the economic position just becomes very awkward. In essence, the way this can be described is that the forcing team takes over the flow of the first 4 rounds. Round 3 becomes an anti-eco, and round 4 becomes a delayed bonus where the team that won round 2 just wants to try for an extra round before a likely equal buy in round 5. That about wraps up round 2. Now, on to the bonus round. Converting your bonus is hugely important, but generally not important enough to stake your economic life on it. This is why we take measures to improve our bonus by buying rifles, accounting for 1 or 2 potential deaths, and holding our guns in the anti-eco, but also why we generally don't force the bonus round. In round 4, which is typically a full buy round for both sides, assuming we fail to convert the bonus, we want to be in a strong economic position. As such, as the team who won the pistol, this round's nice and easy to economize. Just have enough to buy next round, assuming you lose, which is in most cases having around 1700 to 2200 creds. Obviously, the lower end of this range means you're settling for light shields. If you're aiming for an op in round 4, bump that up to around 32 to 3500, which will require one of your players to hold near enough all the creds they made last round. Any players who held enough creds in the anti-eco can fill out the buy with some rifles, and guns held over let you bulk up your economy. Coming back to our anti-eco half buy, it's also possible, factoring for spike plant and kill distribution, to be able to afford a bulldog after light buying last round. Think back to Munchkin in our Gen G example. This round, your opponent should be holding upwards of 4200 creds at round start and spending near enough all of them. Since it's a force round for them, your win will reset them into an eco, but if you lose, you still come out with the ability to buy on all players holding at least 1700 creds. This means any kills your team gets are more economically impactful. Killing 3 or more players will generally mean the enemy can't move their money around to go for perfect buys even if they win the round. By way of example, we can use this non-shim bonus versus DRX. As we can see, DRX have a near perfect buy into the anti-bonus, but after losing 4 players in the round to RB doing this,
sees as well, low HP, 2 kills, maybe the 3rd!
They're sitting on a pretty shoddy buy for round 4, while non-shim still have a full purchase. This general economic trend is what makes the pistol round so important to the flow of the early half. If you lost the pistol and saved last round, this round's even easier to economize. You just want to buy what you can. That's pretty much it, really. Like we said, a clean anti-bonus is important to come into round 4 as strong as possible. As we've said, this round gets easier the more economic damage you've inflicted on your opponent in the eco, which you can always check by cross-referencing the amount of bought guns you saw with the number of players that have purchase money on the tab screen. Finally, in the 4th round of the half, assuming the general economic flow we've covered thus far has been followed, this round everyone should be aiming for rifles. As the team whose bonus was last round, if you manage to inflict good economic damage in your bonus, this can be a great round to pull out the Outlaw, since you'll be able to capitalize on the weaker buy you forced the anti-bonus team into. This is also true if you convert the bonus, since the Outlaw threatens the enemy team into hard ecoing for heavy shields next round, similarly to how we observed in round 2. Regardless, you should be looking at a strong buy this round. As the team who lost the pistol, if your anti-bonus win was particularly bloody, there is an argument to be made that this round you should just save. However, I'm personally of the view that this is too economically passive. It puts you at risk of handing over a massive amount of cash flow to your opponent in the start of the half, which at this stage you should be fighting over. Especially if you manage to plant the spike in an attacking anti-bonus, I would say this round should always be a purchase. Of course, the more guns you held over from your anti-bonus, the better your buy this round and in the next will be. Regardless of the outcome of round 4, the economic flow of a half becomes much more fluid from this point onwards. Next, we're going to discuss another element of economy which starts to become important typically around round 4. Okay, let's talk about ults. Ultimates are also a massively important element of the economic game, and most of the time we want to plan our ult uses around either building our own economy or shattering the other teams. Ults generally generate in fairly uniform cycles. The team who won the pistol will also usually get their ults to cycle in a little earlier than the other team, but this is by no means invariable. The way I view it, the first ult cycle is where you can be a little more liberal with ults to generate economic advantages. This is because in the first 6 or so rounds of a half, both teams are just looking to build their money to make the last 6 rounds as smooth as possible and protect against the economic deficit of losing 2 rounds in a row. This in theory guarantees a cleaner win with more players alive, so allows the economy to build massively during an easy round. By way of example, in this round against 100 Thieves Eco, Leviathan chose to use their silver ult to control a lobby and guarantee the win in the early trade fight. This made it much easier for their 3-man stack to win out, and because they won with all 5 alive, they didn't have to rebuy any guns. This massively boosted their economy in the half, protecting all of them from saving after their first round loss and giving Okeanos and Tex enough creds to buy after their second in a row and still have creds for the next round. This is why it's important to stockpile creds early in the half. Loss bonuses build up fast, and being able to buy after 2-3 losses in a row takes economic pressure off your team while you can keep layering it on the enemy. This is especially true if anyone has an ult in the bonus or in round 4, since these rounds determine who comes out advantaged from the start of the half. Of course, rounds where either or both teams are on the brink of an economic reset are always good times to be spending ults, even in the first cycle, so we want to be looking out for rounds where our own team or the opponent has forced down to get higher value out of our ults. Later ult cycles are where we want to be more opportunistic and targeted with our ult uses. This is the kind of reasoning that produces rounds like this. This is around the first ult cycle, but the reason so many ults were spent in this round is PaperX's desire to reset EG onto an eco because of their weak money, and EG's desire to prevent that from happening. This type of situation is produced in economic circumstances where one team is starting to pull ahead economically and the other is on the brink of a reset during an ult cycle. Thinking specifically about the numbers then, we typically want to spend our ults either in situations where we have forced down and thus need to win to be able to buy next round, or where our opponents have all forced and are in the same situation. Rounds like this, we can say are worth 2 for the economically advantaged team, since the disadvantaged team will have to eco the next one. Once a half is flowing, it's quite easy to establish some of the simpler rounds we've discussed so far. We know when one or both teams have a full buy, or when one team is clearly economically advantaged against an eco round, and how to plan our ult uses to try and capitalize on these states. Now, for our final section, we're going to look at awkward economic situations. Broadly, this refers to any round that isn't as simple as one or both teams forcing or ecoing. Because Valorant awards creds based on round outcomes, things like winning with low numbers or saving guns can cause a lot of flux in economic flow between players on the same team. This is something we need to be able to deal with in matches. First things first, we need to know when to save. As we know, saving your gun forfeits some of the liquid money you make for losing the round, but means you keep your weapon and any armor that you have going into the next. Sometimes, it's nice and easy to know when to save. If you're defending and one player forced but everyone else has creds for the next round after your loss, then your last surviving player might want to hold their rifle to keep everyone on a good gun. Unwinnable 3v5 retake in a forced round? Save those guns. Forced down and have no time to plant anymore? We save those too. The big thing is that saving also depends on the economic state of your opponent. If you're in a retake situation against an attacking team who are forced, for instance, but your team still has money enough to buy next round after dying, going for the kills even if time is low can be a good call. Generally, you won't stop your opponent from buying next round, but you will force them to spend the creds they made from winning this one. What this means is that the economy of any player who dies isn't building, it's just staying stagnant. Now, let's move on to what to do when our credits desync. It's common, especially in the later end of a half, for our team's credits to start desyncing. Generally, our immediate goal with desynced creds is just to sync them up again and minimize the number of rounds we throw away with things like bad forces. The more players we have that are able to force a decent weapon, the better the case is for having everyone force, even if it's a bit shoddy, and just ecoing the next if we don't win. Situations with just one player who held a rifle while everyone else has no money, for example, are the kind of times where it's better to just save and play our best around keeping the rifle in play for as long as possible. In situations like this, you're on minimum 2400 loss bonus after losing the current round, so the saving player is safe to dip a little into the 1k they made last round for things like util. It's also important to pay attention to your opponent's economic state when making these decisions. If your opponent is sitting on massive amounts of funds and it's not too late in the half, it's often safer to save instead of going for bad buys, since you're going to be contending with full buys for a while even after a round win, and want the best chance at possible of building a streak with some ults. If your opponents are also stumbling though, say after they win a bad force round with one player alive, and you're sitting on an okay buy too, it can be good to go for the force to put your best effort into preventing your opponent from building up their economy and becoming more of a problem. Finally, what do we do after winning a force round with very few players alive? This can happen as early as round 4 if we win the anti-bonus with 1 or maybe no players left standing. I would say situations like this depend entirely on your opponent's economy. Winning a bad anti-bonus, for instance, will still have forced the bonus team to spend their money and their economy hasn't had time to build yet, so forcing down with some light shields, bulldogs, whatever, is a good call to try and stop that money from building. If your opponent's swimming in it though, it can be good to go for a light buy. This is especially so if you didn't get plant creds from the bad win, or have no ults to give you the edge if you were to force. In general, it's important to take a fluid, ad hoc approach to making economic decisions based on the outcomes of the rounds we're playing each game. We've now completed our dive into economic decision-making in VALORANT. We've covered the basic functions of the game's economy system, the template ways we should be treating the early rounds of a half, ult use, and how to treat some of the more niche or specific situations we might encounter in the flow of a half. I hope this video has been useful to you and gave you some useful tricks to optimizing your own play. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a lovely day.